Welcome back to the Star Wars Show. Today we are joined by a good friend of mine, Dave Filoni. How's it going?
Good. I've never been on this show like this before with the couch situation and the whole...
Right?
What would you like to discuss?
So, I mean, we've had you on before to talk about Rebels. Today I want to talk about Dave Filoni. I want to talk about you. Let's get to the heart of
Why do
this.
we want to talk about that?
I'm curious about how you started off with Star Wars, because I know you've been a fan for pretty much your entire life.
Yeah, there was no being a fan when I was a kid. You were just a kid, and we were lucky enough to grow up with Star Wars. We were just kids growing up in a Star Wars era.
How exactly did you get started in the animation industry?
My first big job was working as a layout artist on King of the Hill. 4 guys drinking beer next to a
Really?
fence
You
in
worked
Texas.
on King of the Hill? I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? I was able to do layout. I was able to do assistant direct. I was able to do timing, learn about design, talk to background artists. I was able to do a whole bunch of things that had I been an in-betweener at Disney, I never would have made it or known about those jobs. So my skills I learned out of school wasn't that what I like about this field isn't animating. I like telling the story.
Tell me about how, you got involved with Lucasfilm.
I was on Airbender, and it was just the greatest experience. I worked with a lot of friends of mine, from Mike and Brian to Giancarlo. And Giancarlo's like, Filoni, what would you do? What would get you off of this show, Airbender? It's such a fun show. What would it take? I'm like, if George Lucas called and offered me a job, I'd go. And he and I it's never going to happen. So a week later, I get this phone call, and I answer it, and it's this woman. She's a producer for Lucasfilm Animation, and I'm thinking there's no Lucasfilm Animation. What is this? And she's like, we're hiring, we want to interview for supervisor director of Clone Wars TV series. I'm like, really? Didn't you just do that? And I said, look, I have to ask you a question. Who is this really? And she's like, excuse me? I'm like, is this the guys around the corner? Because this is just, it's kind of mean. And she's like, is this Dave Filoni? I'm like, yeah. Do you work on Airbender? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, you're the guy. And I'm thinking oh, wait a minute. This suddenly sounds really real. And my whole ambition was just to interview. I just wanted to meet George, so when I was in line at Revenge of the Sith, I could say, yeah, well, I met George Lucas. How cool is that? Because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this job. So I go in and I meet him, and we talk for about 20 minutes. It was a 20-minute meeting. And he looked at my portfolio, and he kind of went through it like this. And I thought, yeah, this is what I thought. This guy's not, you're not going to impress him with your art. And then just remembering my manners when the time was over, I got up and I thought, well, I'm never going to see this guy again. So I shook his hand. I said, it was very nice to meet you. And he said, very nice to meet you. And I went back to the green room, and I felt this great sense of relief. That's over, and that was cool. And you know what? He was a really nice guy. And then the door opens, and Catherine sticks her head in and says, he likes you. You got the job. And I was like, what? And then she shut the door, and I remember my first thought was oh my gosh, these people have no idea what they're doing. I thought, you're going to hire me for this job? You're crazy.
What was it like going from a fan to being a peer of George Lucas?
At first it was incredibly intimidating, and I think he knew he was intimidating. But, he respects hard work, and he respects creativity, and he wants to foster that and make that happen. And so, we were always trying to surprise him and inspire him and make the episodes better than he thought they could be. And he's George Lucas. Sometimes what's surprising is just how normal a guy he could be.
So moving on to Rebels and the reintroduction of Thrawn, how do you approach bringing something like that in and giving people what they have been begging for and what you think and what they'll love without it being just fan service?
I've always leaned towards if we're going to create something, we should check and see if it existed already to the fans, because it has way more value if we bring that in. And it's why would I just replace it with something new? Yeah, I could create a new guy, sure. But what about Thrawn? Thrawn is great. Thrawn is a character we all know. Thrawn has a lot of credibility. So then you ask yourself, is it right to use him? And can we use him in a way that's similar to the books? I think we're going in a really great place in Rebels, and it's a huge team effort. So I've been lucky to be here at this time with so many talented people. And, we have this show. We didn't have this before at Lucasfilm. And so this is really exciting.
I do want to take a second to thank you so much for, supporting our little team and what we do.
Of course. My gosh. Well, you guys report on the show. Of course I have to.
So stick around. There will be more Star Wars show in just a minute.
More? You said it was too long already.
Well, we're going to cut you down.